Shayna Goldman brings positivity and extensive knowledge on everything humanly possible within the NHL as we approach the trade deadline. Shayna, the long list of names, it just keeps growing as we get closer to the deadline. Where would you like to start? Like when you're waking up today, a week from the deadline, what's the first name that has popped into your head based on what's happened so far and what might happen to come?
Okay, it's not a very exciting name, but Gavrikov is the first player that comes to mind because of the Orlov trade.
Yes.
And I feel like the Capitals just helped out the Bruins with a good trade. Like that was way too good of a trade. The return was not as much as they should have pushed for. They got probably the best defenseman that is going to be moved besides Chychrun. And not only that, did it mess up the Gavrikov trade, but if the Capitals are selling, and we know how many, unrestricted free agents they have, did they just completely kill the market for someone who was definitely going to be an overpay? Like, I like that spice.
So you mean like Chychrun was going to be an overpay, and then Boston got Orlov at such a reasonable price that now they have to revisit everything around the league, and it adjusted the price of other players as well?
I think Chychrun was originally going to be an overpay, and then it feels like the longer Arizona waited, the more that slid. But Gavrikov felt like the perfect overpay target, and I don't have an issue with his game. I think that the environment in Columbus the last couple of years has made it really difficult to judge what he actually is because everything's been so bad around him. But a team was going to overpay for that. It's the Ben Sherrod of last year. It's the Jeremy Lazan of last year. General managers love to overpay for depth defensemen, and they say it. Look, we're adding to our depth. No, you're getting a replacement level defenseman. There's a difference when you're saying this is a good second or third pair guy versus a depth defenseman. It usually means replacement level.
But Orlov comes in, sorry Duffer, but Garnet Hathaway, I call him Hathaway like the song What Is Love, but anyway,
which is Gavrikov's goal scoring song, by the way, in Columbus.
Oh, is it really? So that is even better that it's all connected. But Garnet Hathaway is a decent player, and not only did they get Orlov, but they get depth up front to make the Boston Bruins even better.
Yeah, this is like an actually good, we're talking again about depth players and the difference between that and replacement level. And Hathaway is actually a good player. He's very versatile. He's tough to play against, which when you're tough to play against, it can mean two things. It can mean that you're just physical, or it can mean you're actually genuinely hard to play against because you make life difficult for the opponent. And he's a mix of both in the best way. Good penalty killer, good forechecker, can recover dump-ins, can, win puck battles under pressure. Exactly what you want in a fourth liner. So the best get better, and it's good for Boston because they want to maximize this year. They don't know what the future holds for David Krejci and Patrice Bergeron. They should be doing every single thing they can to make sure they, take advantage of what they did in the regular season. So while everyone's looking, does Boston really need this? Yeah, they do, because this year's that important.
Didn't give up any prospects. It's a crime, really.
They don't have many to give up anyway.
No, but you need to try to deplete their base. Now, you're different than your colleague Dom at The Athletic, because Dom had some pretty strong and witty commentary as it pertained to Gavrikov and his woes in Columbus, and the fact that he's basically being given credit for being the tallest kid in kindergarten. And I loved that line. And it sometimes just because you play a lot with a bad team doesn't mean you're a great player. But I do still think Gavrikov is very interesting. What else on the blue line around the league is of interest to you if we stay in that? And is there anything new on Chychrun? Are we ever going to see a Chychrun deal?
If we don't see a Chychrun deal, I just think the leverage Arizona has is just fleeting. Last year was unfortunate. The injury changed things for them, but they could have acted sooner. The more term he has, the better this is going to work out. Yes, if Arizona has to retain a chunk, they're retaining it for longer. But from someone that actually needs to hit the cap floor, it's a good thing. I would like to see a trade happen, and I really wonder if the Blues are going to be the team to spice everything up, because they want this to be a quick turnaround. Like, how surprising and interesting would it be if they were, the front runners for Meyer and for Chychrun? They have the assets. The other defenseman that intrigued me, you look at Ottawa clearing space, you have to think they're going to add someone. They got rid of Zaitsev, who was one of the worst defensemen in the league, and the Blackhawks get closer to the cap floor and closer to the bottom of the standings by doing it. Could a Parayko deal be on the horizon? That's exactly where my mind went. And if a Parayko deal happens, is there a domino effect for Chychrun? And the other team that we talked about last week, it's Dante Fabro in Nashville and Ekholm in Nashville. Like, what happens there?
Well, especially with Johansson getting hurt and now being out for the year, it weakens the Predators significantly.
Yeah, absolutely, Duffer. Quickly, because you mentioned Parayko, I think it was Monday, Duffer threw that at me, and I was like,
other way around.
Huh?
Other way around. I want nothing to do with Parayko's contract.
Okay, I threw that at you, and you were like, no. But I was like, I kind of like Parayko, but that 7 years, $6.5 million left, like that's a lot to pay. Now, what would you get in Colton Parayko? I know the size, but is there some other metrics that you'd say, yeah, Parayko is worth it, the 7 years at 6.5?
So you got a big player. General managers love that. You get a physical player who can block shots. General managers love that. And you have someone with a very hard shot. General managers love that. I just don't know if the pedigree matches up to his level of play, but it's really tough to decipher. And this is something I'm working on this right now for Monday about Ryan O'Reilly and what his value truly was in St. Louis and how much we blame environment and surroundings versus actual player value. It's really tough to tell, especially for a player who we haven't seen elsewhere. With Parayko, it's not his fault that the Blues never gave him a capable partner in recent years. They got rid of Pietrangelo. It added to Parayko's workload, and they gave him Marco Scandella. They gave him Mikkola, who was never fit for that kind of role. So it's definitely dragged down his game. I think he genuinely needs a good puck mover, a good skater to play on his side for balance, because when you have someone like him that can go towards that one-dimensional type of play, you need someone to balance it out, right? I don't think every puck mover needs a one-dimensional defenseman to balance them out, but I think a one-dimensional defensive defenseman does need someone to balance them out. I just worry at this point in his career with the contract, how could it ever be worth it? That's a contract I think the Blues have to pay someone to take, but I think that his name value and his size are what's going to change that.
Yeah, it'll to a certain extent shock me if teams decide to help St. Louis and alleviate all of their locked up, defensemen for the next 5 years, but it sounds like that's quite possible. A new name potentially is Joel Farabee from Philadelphia, because things have not been smooth with him under Tortorella this year and coming off of surgery.
Yeah, it wasn't even smooth pre-Tortorella. It just feels like the Flyers have been spinning their wheels in mud for way too long, and it's nice that they finally recognize they're just not good enough with this roster. Farabee is someone that's a complementary winger. He's not going to be your elite game breaker, which every contender should try to have. So if you can bring him in for a proper role, I think you're in good shape. Again, Flyers, it's very tough to determine. They have their center depth is pretty terrible, and everyone's playing out of position. I think that trickles down onto the wingers, especially those who aren't the game breakers. So those who missed out on Timo Meier should be calling Philly every single day going, where's Travis Konechny at? Can I go for him? And those who can't get Travis Konechny, start calling for Joel Farabee. He's young enough. Yes, he has contract. Yes, he has term, but he's young enough that it's not quite a reclamation project, but a change of scenery, which sometimes are actually good things and not just for, fringe players. It's nice to see the Pujaris of the league and the Farabees to get that opportunity elsewhere.
Okay, let me kind of narrow in on the Sabres a little bit, because the talk now for me has more been about the crease. And Duffer this morning just said, who cares who plays in goal? Like, it doesn't matter right now. And I kind of tend to agree to a certain extent right now. Is there a goalie out there? And I don't know that the Sabres would do it, because they have 3 on their roster. What are they going to do? Add a 4th? Like, I mean, I don't think that's going to happen. But is there a goalie out there? The boys on the morning show talked about Jonas Korpisalo. Chris Drieger was on waivers yesterday. We'll find out at 2 p.m., but he's coming back from an injury. Is there a goalie out there that could really help? And is there a good market for that?
So you're telling me you don't like 3 goalie systems and you really don't like 4 goalie systems?
That's too many goalies. So you guys do your Too Many Men podcast. I say a Too Many Goalies podcast is definitely not good.
Okay, so the goalie market's tough because we never know how a goalie's gonna play outside in a different environment with different goalie coaches, right? Like, it's so hard to project, especially if there's a midseason move. Korpisalo worries me. I know he's been better than expected this year, but I don't think he's as strong as this year represents. The last couple of years, they're not inspiring. There's a reason he lost the crease in the first place in Columbus. So he's someone I think someone's going to maybe overpay for extra goalie depth. That's not who I would go for. I like Karel Vejmelka. I know you don't. I know he's a right catching goalie, so he's a no-go, but he's who I would look at. I think he does a really good job managing chaos. And you're right, Buffalo doesn't need a goaltender right now for where they are, but in the future it would help. And their defense isn't perfect. So ideally someone who can manage chaos and can handle playing behind a high volume, shots against kind of style would work. Chris Drieger is intriguing because he was really good in Florida. I think that he should have gotten more playing time over Bobrovsky, but we all know that, the contract and the situation, and Spencer Knight ended his tenure there. He was incredibly unlucky, so it was tough to see how he'd bounce back in Seattle this year. Everybody broke in Seattle last year. They had one of the best defenses, but when a quality chance got through, a goalie allowed a goal against. So I'd like to see him get a new opportunity, and maybe Buffalo would be a good fit.
One more year at 3.5 for Drieger, just to point that out, right? So you're getting involved with next year Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, Eric Comrie, Devin Levi. So it kind of scrambles that a little bit.
Yeah.
Unless Seattle pays and does another team a favor. That's the thing. Like, the Sabres have the cap space to kind of maximize and say, we'll take him for a pick, and then you can just worry about the 2 goalies you have. And that's what more teams need to try to like pressure others to do.
Yeah, obviously it would be so hard to bring in Drieger with no games played and try to put him into the middle of this push for a playoff spot, even though his pedigree, suggests that he has been able to post numbers. I know it's early. We're less than 24 hours removed from last night's game winner, but have you done contract projections for Ilya Lyubushkin's next deal?
Yeah, been calculating them all night. The fact that play, everything about it, shorthanded, breakaway, it's a new side we never knew we had. I like him though, this is the kind of defensive defenseman I actually do like, and I'm very nitpicky with this because you want a defensive defenseman to be someone you don't notice. They're not reacting, throwing their body in front of pucks, scrambling all the time. They look super busy, and that's great and wonderful, and it's nice to see the effort, but it doesn't mean you're good. It's mean you didn't avoid something in the first place. But I like him, and I think that he's someone that really does work well with a puck mover, and we've seen him in Toronto with Morgan Rielly, and I think that's like a good example of what he can be. So with a good puck mover on his side, I wonder if he could be, a stronger piece for years to come.
Okay. We talked about the penalty kill with you 2 weeks ago, I believe. Is there somebody around the league that is like Rasmus Dahlin, that is your best penalty killing defenseman, your power play quarterback, and plays the most minutes at 5-on-5? Like, are we asking Dahlin to do too much? Because even last night, like, the power play for Tampa went 1 for 3. The Sabres are barely over 60% since January 1st on the penalty kill. Like, are we asking Dahlin to do too much?
It might just be a shock to the system for him because, I think he's taking on more and more important roles than years past. But you can be that all-around defenseman. We look at players like Roman Josi. They manage his minutes and don't put him in those penalty killing situations because it's for the best, and they have players who can take it on. But you look at Adam Fox, and he handles everything. He plays the most minutes at 5-on-5. He plays top competition. He is the Rangers' best penalty killer because he adds a little dimension, a little spice, a little disruption to their units. And you can even look at Cale Makar. He already played a ton, but Colorado made the active decision to start putting him in penalty kill situations. I think it was 2 years ago at the end of the year, and last year he really started killing penalties. And it hasn't weighed on his game at all. But I do think it's important when a team starts contending and you have that player playing that role, why not do some rest management at the end of the year, right? Like that's something we don't see enough in hockey. And I think that's something that when the Sabres start turning things around and become a true contender and he's playing that kind of role, they should start dipping their toes into the, rest management, not playing him on the back-to-back, giving him a couple games, giving him a couple days off, or maybe play him on the back-to-back and then give him a few days off so he has actual time to completely shut off and rest, right?
Nick Schmaltz's name has seemingly entered the equation of late, which just further highlights the recent Clayton Keller comments about the GM probably not being happy with them having a 9-game point streak. I literally said to Marty the other day, like, the Coyotes are excelling because when Schmaltz and Keller are healthy, they really play quite well together. Why would Arizona be, again, moving off of a top-line player in this never-ending rebuild or whatever the bleep it's called?
Exactly that. They're just perpetually rebuilding. And it's tough because it's not completely this management group's fault that what past management has done, right? They were not dealt a good hand, but this is the route that they chose. They're, you cut costs and you do whatever you can to tank. And it seems like the players they've picked high in the draft are not the game breakers. They want to be the foundational pieces. They can be the secondary and, pieces around it and the complementary stars, but they want Connor Bedard to be their next star. And they're going to just keep cutting cap along the way. And it's such a perplexing situation because they did sign these contracts in the first place. They can probably get a lot back for Nick Schmaltz, but then they're just going to be taking on more bad contracts. So if they can leverage that to their advantage, like right now, 26% of their cap is dead cap hits between Andrew Ladd, Brian Little, and Shea Weber. That's not something to be proud of, but if you can, manage this and say, okay, we'll take on your bad contract. You can have Nick Schmaltz, but we'll take 2 first-round picks back or something wild like that, that would get them way more than they ever should for a player like Nick Schmaltz. I would be intrigued to see, can they quickly use that to turn it around and kind of follow the blue style? But it doesn't feel that way. It just feels like they're going to keep going in this circle until I have no idea when. Maybe when the new arena's there. Yeah. Like, is that when they start turning it around? Maybe that's the selling point, but
or maybe never.
It's just maybe never.
Well,
maybe it's tough to defend.
Rupper would say over a year from now when Matthews leaves and goes to the desert. So.
Oh, there we go. Could you imagine?
Could happen after his all-star appearance and a farewell tour in his home city of Toronto? Then he leaves. Hey, quickly, we talk about making big deals. I have fallen in love, and so did Duffer, with this player at development camp here in Buffalo at the Lecom Harbor Center with the New Jersey Devils. His name is Dawson Mercer. The other day I texted Duffer and they were like, hey, if the Devils get Timo Meier, maybe they'd be willing to part way with Dawson Mercer. Could we get him? Like, am I crazy to think that I would like my team to overpay right now? Or maybe this summer and go get Dawson Mercer. He had a game-winning overtime goal last night against LA. Like, I love that player. What do you say?
I like him a lot. I think that there's a lot of room for growth in his game. And I wonder sometimes this year if he's been in the position to succeed as much. We look at last year, what he did, right? When Jack Hughes was out, he was asked to step up in the lineup and he was outstanding as their second line center, but he also had Bratt on his wing, one of the best two-way wingers in the game right now. So it definitely helps him to have a play driver. He's not at that point yet, but he was a rookie. What's the big deal? This year we see him playing more, on the wing so he can play top 6 minutes. And I think that helps him. I don't think he's the play driver yet, but I think he can get there. So I do wonder if he's going to be the breaking point for a Timo Meier deal. New Jersey has other prospects they might want to move instead, like a Holtz instead of a Mercer, but it will be intriguing to see. But a player like Mercer, I think, is going to be at his best at center, but if he has the game-breaking winger to help him get to that point. And I think that he can be very good on the wing. For Buffalo, if you're paying for him, are you paying for him as a winger or as a center? And that's the thing, because they have Dylan Cousins already down the middle. And we always see teams overpay for centers because there's the beauty of being a pivot and things like that. I would be curious, like how a Dawson Mercer deal could happen. But if he went to San Jose and he's the game breaker, does San Jose ever give him up? I don't know.
I have a different take that we haven't talked about before. What would stop Detroit from getting Erik Karlsson?
Oh, okay. Okay. So here's the one downside. Mo Seider just became a power play 2 quarterback. And if they don't have a problem with that, that's fine. Because look, everyone else makes a bigger points than I think the players do. In the Norris conversation, you have to be on power play 1 because you have to have points inflating your totals and things like that. But like in reality, it's not that big of a deal. And you can manage his minutes at even strength and on the penalty kill better. I would say, I'm not sure Detroit wants to go for such a right now player right now. I don't know if they're there yet, but it would be interesting. I want to see Detroit be a big player. They have the cap space. I want to see them mess with the contenders who are all vying for Karlsson and Chychrun and Meier. If anyone has the assets to do it, it's them, it's St. Louis, it's Seattle, it's Buffalo. Like, that would make things really interesting.
Well,
pretty speechless.
Yeah, I am speechless because I never thought Detroit for Erik Karlsson. And then I'm thinking, well, maybe one part of me says, yeah, get him. So you're stuck with that $11.5 million like cap hit for the next 4 years. But at the same time, like, well, if Karlsson keeps playing at a pace where even if he got a point a game, 80 points a season, it would be really hard to compete with that group in Detroit. So, but just staying in the defense, we talked Parayko, Chychrun, Gavrikov. Like, I feel like the Sabres have a need, and it is probably that 5-6 spot. Like, Jacob Bryson right now is in that spot, but they don't have anybody that could really make that third pair a solid pair with Lyubushkin. What kind of players should they look at to be able to fill in that role?
Well, if they want to go the rental route, call up Washington. Nick Jensen's available, Trevor Van Riemsdyk, and the players of that build. But it makes sense if they don't want a rental because they may not be in the race long term this year and they have bigger things to think about. There's nothing wrong with, acknowledging where the team's strengths and weaknesses are and trying to build for next year while helping yourself this year, as long as it's not an overpayment for a rental. I think if you want to make that third pair click for Lyubushkin, like you need a puck mover. You need someone with a little bit of offensive pep that can move the puck, skates well, can break it out of his own zone with possession, so you can let him focus on the retrievals and, denying entries against and things like that, and try to have that balance, because right now you have that on the first two pairs. You have Samuelsson as, very good defensive defenseman. He plays with an offensive defenseman, whether it's Power or Dahlin. I think you just need to keep that style going for all three pairs.
Yeah, the Sabres didn't draft a lot of defensemen, right, the last few years. So it's not like they have a lot of defensemen coming in as well. So getting somebody young that maybe has a lot of upsides for the future may be the way to go. I like that.
His name is Ryan Johnson.
Ryan Johnson, yes.
Yeah. And they have his rights. And
he's in all the trade talks, though. He's getting moved.
No, I think there's more people definitely trending towards the Sabres having an opportunity to sign him now than what we, considered earlier. Are more teams, in your opinion, I guess we're tight for time here, quickly, more teams going to follow Washington's lead, do you think, after what they did yesterday? And which teams would you see as that? Is Nashville potentially among them here?
Nashville has to be, right? I think what the Capitals did was very smart, because their core is as right now as it gets. They're older, they're aging. They're just not that good this year. The core is not that good. The supplemental pieces are not that good. And all of the injuries have just made everything that much worse. As much as they prepared themselves this offseason for it with additions like Connor Brown, it just hasn't worked out. So I think that they're doing the best thing that they can. And they're not saying, stop competing, stop playing, go try to tank. They're not saying that at all. They're just saying, we're going to better position ourselves for next year. I think Vegas, my hot take, should do this, especially with the Mark Stone injury. This is the weakest Golden Knights roster that they've had in years. And I think a couple future assets and just better positioning themselves for next year would be the best thing that they could do. But I understand they're not going to, because it's Vegas and they have to go for it every single year and go for the biggest games and, mess up their future even more. And that's just their vibe. Nashville.
I agree. Keep going.
Nashville has not done this, and they could have done this numerous times, and UC Saros has saved them. UC Saros has been one of the best goalies in the league this year, and it's still not saving them. I think the Johansson injury is going to be what finally forces them, because I don't think anything else was going to do it. We heard maybe they'll break up their players, maybe they'll make moves. We've heard this before, and then they just didn't do it. I think this is what's going to force them to say, stop, you're not good enough, figure it out, step back. Other teams are doing it. And just try for next year. Keep, trying to quickly turn it around.
Yeah. Niederreiter and Ekholm would definitely be a couple of the biggest interesting names coming out of Nashville if they decide to punt. Shayna, thank you. We are out of time, sadly.
Thanks for having me.
We will see you next week. We'll be back to wrap Sabres Live after this.